All right, guys, welcome to episode one of the PHYSIQUE-CAST. Joined with my head coach, Mr. Mark Rice. How are you, big man?
I'm keeping very, very good, man. I won't lie, first ever podcast, so definitely a little bit nervous.
There's absolutely nothing to be nervous about, nothing to be nervous about. All right, guys, so we are launching our new podcast, which we're both very excited about because we both felt we had a previous podcast, the Elite Coaching Podcast, and it was really good, very enjoyable. But we want to kind of break this podcast down to a bit more of a simpler, easy to understand form of education for coaches, for competitors, keeping it within the realms of prep, and also having our coaches corner as well, where myself and Mark will be inviting prep coaches from Ireland, UK, all around the world on to discuss some topics, and we're really excited about it. You know, it's a new venture that we're both massively looking forward to getting stuck into. So we're going to run through now in the beginning just a bit of an introduction into Mark, because I'm sure all of you would have heard me talk about myself for long enough, and you all hopefully know who I am at this point. So Marco, just give us a bit of an introduction to yourself, man, like how you kind of get into the fitness industry, what's kind of your background like within bodybuilding, and just kind of how you got to kind of the position that you're in today.
So I suppose with myself, I started training about 10 years ago at this point, which is absolutely crazy. I don't even like saying that out loud. I started training nearly about 10 years ago. And it was kind of like, once I got into the gym at the start, found bodybuilding very, very quickly. The classic, if anybody remembers back in the day, the Jay Cutler like Living Large series on YouTube and stuff like that. I remember finding those, and that's how I got into it at the start. Then just started training in the gym I was probably training for about 2 years, from when I was like 16 to 18 before I got qualified. And then as soon as I finished my leaving cert, I went and got qualified as a PT. And just after that, actually, funny story, man, about when I first got into bodybuilding, I remember I was in transition year and I was watching that Jay Cutler Living Large series. I remember me and my friend were both watching it. And this was like what would you call it, the level of delusion that I was at, the anabolic steroids back in the day. I remember we watched that series together, and I turned to him, I was like, man, think if you went for like 6 months without any cheat meals whatsoever, like you could get to the Olympia. And we were like, maybe, man, maybe back in the day. But so from there, anyways, got qualified when I was about 18, then ended up opening up my own private PT studio in the town that I'm from, and ran that for like a year and a half. And also throughout that time, that was when I done my first ever, like, I suppose, quote unquote, structured gaining phase, and was actually doing a powerlifting-esque program at the time. I remember I was being coached by a guy from Dublin, and at the time when I was doing it, I was like started with him at like 77 kilos, and it was like when online coaching was just starting. You pay your €300 up front to get a plan sent over by email, and like check-in is just like a voice note, and went from like 77 kilos up to like 97.5 kilos in like 6 months. And I remember when I decided to finally pull the plug on that was one day I got to the gym and I was walking up the stairs, and I literally got out of the car, walked up the stairs, and by the time I got to the top of the stairs, I was like completely out of breath. And like 5 minutes later, I had like sweat patches, and I was like, man, I'm 19 years old, out of breath after walking up the stairs, and like can't squat down without knee sleeves on. I was like, something needs to change here. So ended up doing dieting phase, dieting down to like 85 kilos, and just really enjoyed that process. It's still into bodybuilding at the time, but hadn't prepped or done any like official dieting phases or anything like that. Sold the equipment to two lads who were working in the gym, and they took it over. I went traveling, and then when I came back from traveling, I decided that I'm going to do a prep like that. I just wanted to commit to it. I wanted to do it for a very long time, but just had never actually committed to it, and ended up going into my first ever prep, which was under very subpar circumstances. Came back was pretty much untrained. We had been training like 2 or 3 times a week in like pretty much a leisure center gym when I was in France, and done that prep, and it was it definitely created more of a love for bodybuilding, but towards the end, man, I just wanted the prep to end because it was just under dire circumstances. But anyway, that was good. Competed in men's physique, which is, or men's bikini as you would now call it, is definitely not where my physique belongs anyway, but it was a good experience. And then after that, I went through the absolute ringer with a very shocking rebound. And I remember I stepped on stage on the 1st of September at like 70 kilos. And on the 1st of October, I was like 90 kilos. So, and I started my prep at 87.5. So I've been there through the rebound process as well. And after that, anyways, kind of just fell more and more in love with bodybuilding after that and got back into it. Has been just training then consistently for the last 4 or 5 years. And in that time, done one photo shoot prep. Last year, obviously, went through prep as well for about 22 weeks and was 4 weeks out. They ended up having to pull the show due to a back injury that was just not good. And after that, just reversed out. Now in the gaining phase, doing another photo shoot in 6 weeks' time. And that's in regards to the bodybuilding side of things. Obviously, been PTing since I was like about 7 years ago. And after I came back from traveling, got into working in a gym, was working there for like 2 years. And then just over 2.5 years ago, left that to a full-time online coaching. And obviously, in that 2 years, reached out to yourself for the consultations when I had my first photo shoot prep clients. That's how I got to know you. And will be 3 years online coaching this September. So that is my story. Sorry for rambling on there a bit, but yeah, that's my own story, how I got into bodybuilding and coaching.
Oh, that's good, man. It's good to give people a background as well, because, I think it's nice to know a story behind the face. And, if you have that, ability to voice it on a podcast, man, go for it. This is what these platforms are for. And great to hear, like, I think from a coaching perspective as well, you being able to identify highs and lows of preps, like going through your first prep, having the rebound, having to then go through the second prep and not make it to the stage. There's so much skill set that's learned inside of processes like that, that you can carry over into your own clients, you can carry over into your own into your own coaching kind of ethics, and you have a very good understanding of what a good prep feels like. But you also have that first-hand experience of when things don't go right. And we just talked about this with your own prep client who's just gotten COVID. You had that ability to like manage that ship really well and manage his expectations of like what could be perceived as a bad week, and you were able to kind of turn that around. And I think that's always skill sets that are learned from your own experiences. And that's what this game is all about. It's about getting your own experiences and learning it firsthand and learning how to manage those feelings and processes quite well, which is great. And you just to give it a bit of, I suppose, a touch of like when you spoke about like us meeting and our kind of first introductions of each other, that was kind of where this concept of our rebrand kind of inevitably came from. And this is one thing we wanted to talk about on the podcast today, was kind of our reasoning for rebranding and our reasoning for separating, which we were Team AD, myself, in the past, and having that kind of new reintroduction into Ultimate Physiques. And the reason why I wanted to do it, guys, just being completely honest, my passion lies within prep coaching. It lies within bringing people to the stage, bringing people through photo shoot preps, running the much more aggressive style transformations like we have within our U12 project. And that's where your passion lies. And if your passion is within something, you gotta go get after it, you gotta follow it. And when I was making that transition and making the decision to set up a coaching team here, I knew first and foremost that Mark was going to be one of the guys that I wanted. And you probably seen from like my Instagram and stuff, I never advertised that I was taking on. I never tried to hire people externally. I knew that I needed to have a team of people that, number one, I could trust their ability to coach people, but I knew a team of people that had good ethics behind their coaching as well. And that's the one thing that I know I really took away from our first conversations when we did a consult about your prep clients, how much care you had for them. If you were willing to come on board, a coaching call with me and kind of allow me to give as much insight and input as I possibly could into your prep clients to even get a 1% change in difference in their response. Like that's something that has to be said for. So when I knew I wanted to set up a team, that's when I contacted you and said, look, I have an idea of something that I want to run with. You know, do you want to jump on a call and we'll hash it out, we'll talk about it. And we did, and I think you just kind of got married to the concept of it already, and kind of married to the idea of where we want this to go and where we want it to be. And that was kind of it, guys. You know, we wanted to make that separation. Now, previously, when in Team AD, we had myself, Julia. Julia was my head coach, and Julia did the predominance of the lifestyle coaching. And myself, I was doing the predominance of the prep coaching. But what inevitably happened, you have this divide almost, and the divide kind of spreads across everywhere. We were holding back on posting too much prep like content in case the lifestyle clients felt that was the direction that we were going in, and maybe they were not a part of that direction. But then also you don't want to post too much lifestyle content, because again, you might have that cross feeling into the prep clients, and they might feel that little bit of an exclusion as well. So, and everything what I came up with the idea of doing was setting up two completely separate coaching teams, you know, setting up the Ultimate Physiques, where that's going to be me and Mark really driving the ship within our prep clients and utilizing that platform of my page and our team page and Mark's page, and just collectively as a uniform spearheading in that direction of being known as the best prep coaching team in Ireland, and cross transferring that into the UK market. And we have a massive client base in America as well, and just really kind of the two of us pushing that as a collective with the team page as well. And then I set up the Lifestyle Project, which is our kind of offset brother brand, if we will, and we just do all of our lifestyle coaching through there. There's a team of coaches that work in there that do 6-week and 12-week transformations, and just that divide was just so refreshing. Like I remember when we were, obviously myself and yourself worked like a lot in the background of getting this thing set up, and you know, I remember when that first day of the rebrand came out, I just had this sense of relief. Like it was the right move to make, you know, which it can be a very, very big decision to make when you rebrand a coaching team, because you're inevitably you're closing a door for people, but you're opening a door for others. And I just think we did it at the right time. And I think for me as a coach, utilizing my resources correctly in the sense of the clients that I'm working with and the direction that we were going in as a coaching team, that was definitely the best decision to make. And I'm just so happy that we did it at the right time. And like I said, it was just following your gut instinct, which we all have to do, you know, at times when it comes to our coaching businesses and our coaching careers. And it was definitely an exciting venture. And now having the two coaching brands doing extremely well, also Ultimate Physiques doing really well with our prep clients, and with the U12 project, which we're only a couple of weeks away from wrapping that up now, which is really exciting to see how everyone has gotten on. And the Lifestyle Project is just flying at the moment as well. So right time, right place, and thankfully it's paid off. Thankfully.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I think one, like, first thing, just to go back on something you said there, is even in regards to just if there was any coaches, let's say, listening to this, or I think it actually can be applied across like multiple realms. Is like, you said that when you messaged me about starting this, that you reached out because of the care that I had taken for my own clients in the past. And I think that is like, in my head, I didn't even notice that, because I feel like that should be just a no-brainer. If there's any like new coaches like coming into the space and you're listening to this now or anything like that, if you put client care first 100% of the time, you will always end up in the right places. Do you know what I mean? You're not going to end up like doing somebody wrong. You're not going to end up with a bad name, bad reputation, even a bad result, if client care is always the number one protocol. And I think if you're somebody starting out, it's not ignorance, but if there's multiple people out there who you can either be around or pay to speak to get more information, to get your client a better result, that's a no-brainer. Like, that should be a non-negotiable. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's paid off tenfold for me in regards to multiple ways, in regards to the relationship with that client, number one, in regards to the result for that client, and then from having those consultations with you in the past, like, come round, you know, full 360 a year later, you're reaching out to me to ask me would I want to be part of your team, and that's like come around full 360. Do you know what I mean? And that's obviously just separate to the rebrand talk that we're having there. But that's just one thing to touch on for coaches if there is anybody getting into the space. Like,
Yeah, it's your circle is so important when it comes to coaching, and the influence that other people can have, not in a sense of influence in your coaching, but influence on your care, your empathy towards clients, and just generally how you conduct and condone yourself. And that attracts to people as well. You know, like if you are, like you said, a coach who is new in the industry and you're actively putting yourself out there to reach out to coaches. And look, do not think that people who you might perceive as maybe higher up the ladder than you, that they're not reaching out to people. You know, I do consultations all the time. I've done consultations recently with Tom Hames from Evolution Coaching around PED female usage. I've done multiple coaching calls with Cal from Pro Coach, with Zach. I've done a couple with Joe Jeffrey. Like, all these people are there, and they're there to use air exposure to for us to level up, and for us to get better. And again, it doesn't matter if you're a coach doing your first ever photo shoot prep, just ask the questions. And as coaches by nature, we're all here to help. You know, every single one of us are here to help, and we got into coaching to try to help people. But that reaching out, that's the best investment you'll ever have, and you'll have the biggest return on that investment as well, because coaches who will view you in our industry will look at you in a very, very positive light. You know, there's a lot of coaches who are just filled with arrogance and ignorance, and who are, I think, in coaching for the wrong reasons. There's a very, very small pool of guys. I put an Instagram story about this recently. Like, there's like a very small little puddle of coaches who are in that ethos of client care, client results, wanting to grow their education, wanting to grow their knowledge base around the intricacies of, you know, bodybuilding and prep coaching and physique development and physique enhancement. And there's a massive pool of people who are just in it for the wrong reasons. And if you can put yourself into the right circles, and sometimes like you gotta pay to get into those circles as well, in regards to doing those consults and putting yourself forward and allowing those coaches to get to know you. But once you're in those circles, like, you're extremely well looked after and cared for, because those coaches will 1000% back you in whatever you wanted to do, or whatever help you needed, or whatever guidance you needed. It is, you know, by far the best investment that you can make, for sure, man, for sure. So, or what we'll do is we'll just give a little bit of a kind of a touch base on where everyone is at the moment inside the team, and that this is a part of the podcast that we wanted to really kind of use and highlight, as a platform to help our clients kind of get out there a little bit more as well, and to use this to kind of speak about our clients and the intricacies of our clients at the moment. So your prep client Nathan, give a bit of a background to on how he's getting on. What's his plan of attack for this year? Kind of where is he at the moment?
So, man, I have to give it to Nathan. He is absolutely smashing it. Usually, actually, under the circumstances that he reached out. I think we started at what? I think it was 15 weeks out. Usually, that's like not a red flag, but it's one of those things that you're like, someone needs to be ready to go for a 15-week prep if you have no experience. But man, he has been absolutely smashing out the park. I can't like commiserate him enough on that. He came and he nailed everything to a T. His plan going forward is he's going to be competing in the NBFI. So we're now 11 weeks out from that. A week later, he'll be doing the WNBF. And then early November, he'll be doing the first PCA natural in Galway. Yeah. Now, this week, he hit his first little bump in the road. He did acquire COVID, unfortunately. So that was something that we've had to manage. But that's another thing as well, is for people listening to this, when you're in prep, it's very easy to be in your head, and something that can be a very minor bump in the road can appear like an absolute mountain, and you feel like it's derailing everything. But this is something that me and Adam spoke about before coming on. This is when with preps, if you almost have, whether it's a week, whether it's 5 days, whatever it is, time implemented in there for a buffer week, for things that can happen, things that might go wrong. Not that you're planning for something to go wrong, but it's never going to be a disadvantage to have an extra week, by your side. So that is something that, fortunately for him, he's in an absolutely fantastic spot 11 weeks out. Like he was getting messages 3 weeks into prep being like, geez, you must nearly be ready now. You know, the classic messages from people who underestimate what stage condition is, thinking that he was ready to step on. But he's in a fantastic spot. So this is literally such a minor bump in the road for him. But that is his plan, man. And this year, obviously, I think it goes without saying, and me and him have obviously spoke about this, you know, at length. He wants to go and do well, but I honestly do believe that he will do very well this year. And I think with one very good structured gaining phase under his belt, he has potential to go extremely far in the sport, like extremely far. He has the mindset, he has the discipline. He comes from an athletic background and was very disciplined in his previous sport. So that's where he's at the minute, and yeah, very very excited to see how he gets on come September.
Yeah, he's in such a good spot, man. Such a good spot, and you know that's just I suppose a compliment to him coming into us in an unbelievable position as well, and you know, kind of subconsciously he's had to do that, and it's not by chance that people come in, they start off preps in great positions. It's by choice, and he made that conscious choice somewhere along the line that he wants to compete. He kept himself in a superb condition. You know, it's probably fair to say starting off as prep, we would have put him maybe like 8 to 10 weeks out by the look of him, and we could have gotten him ready in that point as well with a push, which is an unbelievable place for him to be in. But you gave him more time, you gauged that time frame correctly, you gave him the green light, and being ready so early in July when his last show was going to be the first week of November, like he's got a long road ahead of him, which is very exciting, man. And the plan I think for him is just get into the NBFI and just kind of gauge that first peak and get as much experience as we possibly can with him inside that first peak, and gauge how much food we put in him to fill him, not spill him. And then obviously rolling into the second week. That's only a week later, isn't it? The second one?
Yeah, a week later, which I'm also very excited about. Like that's the other benefit of him being ready so early, man. It's like we can trial so many things in the lead up to the shows and have a good idea. And then like I would be very, very, very surprised if he is not being well fed into the PCA. Yeah, no, I mean the final show of the season, which
if he reaches that level of condition early, it's a very simple transition for him to go into the latter shows of the year, having more tools in the toolbox for him. Like if you peak correctly for the first two, it's almost like a rebound into a peak. You know, you feed him up, you drop his cardio, take his stress away, and just allow him to just train and enjoy the last couple of weeks of his prep. And it's a big gap, you know, that month more or less off where he has no shows, no peaks, nothing to do, and he's in stage condition. That can be a very long month for people. Now, I always find that September to November show within the PCA realm, that's such a big gap for people. Like you're talking, usually the show is anywhere kind of second to third week of September for PCA, and then it's usually first, second week of November. That's a big 4 or 5, even 6 week gap that can be sometimes for people who are already in condition. It's hard to hold that, but if you have them ready early, it's easy to hold it because, like you said, it's a simple reverse, almost like a reverse into a prep, into a peak, should I say, which works quite well. I'm excited for the back end of the year, man. I really am. It's going to be a lot of really good guys we have. I think coming into those PCAs, particularly the Irish, I have a really good first timer, Michelle, who actually was a good friend of mine, a childhood friend of mine, believe it or not. And she's doing her first ever show. We did a photo shoot prep together started last year. And then we're moving into a comp prep this year. So we have PCA in September. We're going to do the first timers class inside that. And then we have the PCA November show as well, but I'm thinking about in between trying to get something for her to do as well, maybe a little bit of a quieter show like a FitX or a BPA, British Physique Alliance. They have one in, I think it's early October in Belfast, which could just be a very simple like drive up, go and do that. They do Jan Tana as well, so you don't have to get your tan done the night beforehand. It's like a one shot tan that morning. So just drive up, you know, register, get up and compete and come home that afternoon. Like it's a really quiet show, and they usually run quite quick as well. And they have some pretty nice prize monies up there as well. One of my girls, Greta, did it last year, and went up and she won the overall and got, it was £700 or £500 for the
That's
overall, which
class.
wasn't bad at all. Yeah, wasn't bad at all.
That's
So we
like a
have
day out.
yeah, I know, man. You know? And so I'm looking forward to see how Michelle gets on, Michelle Warden, with her first time ever competing. Like her shape and structure is absolutely wild for a first timer. So we're kind of starting off that whole process now of she's our first kind of link in with our posing coach and stuff this week. Which is awesome. But again, she's well ahead of time, like well ahead of time. Really checking over the weekend and just looking at the level of conditioning that she's bringing into this and the shape and structure that she's bringing in. I'm really excited for that. Like she's one of those that just fits the bikini criteria so well. You know, she's quite tall. She has really good limb length, like in regards, like her arm length is not quite short. So when she hits those poses, it's quite flowy within the physique. Her waistline is just absolutely tiny, even now, starting off her prep, which is awesome. I'm really excited for that. Then we have Stacey coming back to do the later shows as well. So Stacey done our first season at the start of this year with us, done the two Irish shows and came second in both the Irish shows. So that, I think, from a competitive standpoint within Stacey, was a great win, but a hard pill to swallow as well. It was they're almost like bittersweet, because in her first show it was a 1 point split decision between first and second, and I think the second show was probably the same, to be completely honest. She was beaten by girls who, on par on paper, Stacey could have beaten as well. You know, I just think it was a decision on the judges of what they just favored on the day. You know, Stacey brings in gnarly levels of conditioning, crazy level of muscularity across her delts, her quads, and as a natural, Stacey is one. I know that's probably the hardest thing for people to believe, but Stacey is 100% a natural. Like I remember somebody had made a comment to Stacey about something before, and Stacey didn't even know what it was. Somebody had
Yeah,
mentioned something about a drug before to Stacey, and Stacey was like so naive to the fact, like she, remember she messaged me and said, Adam, I wouldn't even take a paracetamol if you told me to take it. Never mind taking something else. And as I said, when we came away from that first season with Stace, that was like a really good introduction for her to see where she sat
yeah,
inside of that kind of bikini short criteria. And I think Stacey is one of those people where she can go all the way. Like I think Stacey could go to British finals, to worlds, to universes, and easily placing in the top three. Is arguably not like winning those shows. I think she just needs to get that win first. And it's very
yeah.
important for her to get that win first, because it's all just he say. You know, it's me just telling her, look, Stacey, I believe you can do it. But until it actually happens for her, I think we're just chasing that. So she's back in prep now. She's actually away at the moment, and she's away where her kid is dancing in a dance competition. I think she came top 6 in the world or something over the
Oh
weekend.
wow.
Stacey's daughter, yeah. So a massive shout out to Stacey's kid. She did incredibly well. So Stacey is back in prep now, and we're just going for that win, man. We're just going to grab that to grab that dub at the we're going to do the Irish in September and then go to November, and we might look at something in the meantime. The Worlds is in Amsterdam in October, so we're thinking about if we win the Irish, for us, we already have the box ticked. You know,
Yeah,
there's no downfall after that. If we go in September and we win the September show, which again, it was a 1 point decision more or less in the first two shows of the year. I think it's just more time in front of those judges, taking the feedback on board, a little bit crisper condition, maybe look at from a posing standpoint, maybe a little one or two little tweaks in posing. And presentation is flawless. They said the peaks were flawless both times. Just the only thing they said that we could have been potentially beaten on was just a 1% shift in condition. So we're really going for that. Looking at her start point for prep this time around, she looks like she's 6 to 8 weeks out. You know, she's flawless, man. Absolutely. She even sent me a check-in on Monday. We check in Mondays and Thursdays, and even away with her kid, like not having all the tools in the toolbox available to her. Checked in yesterday, and I was like, she just looks incredible, absolutely incredible. So I'm really excited to see how Stace gets on, man. This time around, she's coming back for it. Like I always say, not winning your first show at times can be the best thing in the world to do. And but being in those top spots of a 1, 2, 3 lights the biggest fire under people
Yeah.
because you're so close. You are literally so close. And we had this with Sinead last year, came second in her first 2 shows, and then went on like a domination spree and won 2 top 6 at a universe. Like, she was an unstoppable force at that point. And I think if she would have continued to compete, I don't think anyone could have beaten her. And I think Stacey and Sinead have very similar characteristics, very
Right.
small in height, but pack ridiculous amount of muscle onto their frame, but it fitting into the bikini criteria so well. It's a very fine balance. Like, Stacey would be on the borderline of going to trained, but sure, her level of conditioning when she hits those side shots, oh, it's lights out, man. She's so hard to compete against. So I'm looking forward to see how Stacey gets on, man. I really am.
I'm looking forward to see how she gets on, man. Like,
Yeah,
after seeing her in person and seeing
yeah,
her in person, I cannot wait to see how she gets on. And even, man, there, like, to say that she's in the position she's in, like, obviously not coming first, as you said, is a bitter pill to swallow. But to be in that position in your first season ever is absolutely fantastic. It's one of those things that when you do step back from being like, wow, in an extremely competitive PCA class, I just came second in my first ever show.
yeah.
That's an amazing achievement. But
Yes, man.
like, I had this talk with somebody yesterday. There's always, if you're going to go through something like that, there's always that video that's like, I wish I came higher up. Do you know what I mean? Doesn't
Yeah,
matter if you come last, fifth, fourth, first.
yeah.
You're always like, I wish I'd done a little bit better. You know what I mean?
No,
And that's natural. Like,
I think if Stace would have, in that first Irish show in April, if Stace would have won that show, she probably wouldn't have competed again. Or if she did compete again, she wouldn't have had that same fire to go again in the May show. And then coming to the back end of the season, she might have been up here to compete again. She might not have been. I think as a competitive person, Stacey probably would have set the goal higher of like an overall, which again I think she has the capabilities to go and win an overall. Like, she is a
yeah,
very, very impressive competitor. So I have a lot of excitement for States coming into this year. I really do. And I think because a lot of our conversations have been around that as well, like our kind of prep ethos now, it's driven on just making the improvements that the judges wanted to see, a little bit of an improvement in conditioning. And that's it. It's sometimes I think it's very easy to get wrapped up in that concept of winning, but what you have to do to win, it's very simple. It's just meet the requirements that judges have set for her. So I went to speak to Tommy Staunton immediately after the show and got the feedback, and I almost instantly spoke to Warren, got the feedback, and the two of them said the exact same thing. Said it was almost tied across the judging panel, and it's just a decision they have to make. Look, we have two
yeah,
girls
of
who
course.
on paper almost have identical scores. There might be a 1 point in between. We just got to make a decision on the day, and that's fine. Like, we take it. This is bodybuilding. You take the highs with the lows. And I think for us just coming into this season, I'm excited for her because she has that level of drive that I haven't seen from her in the past, knowing where she had just come from with a very short gap of high food. Because again, Stacey is already on the cusp of muscularity for bikini, so we can't put her into like a six
Big
month
thing.
to a year off season. She would just simply, and as a natural, as crazy as it sounds, she just outgrow the bikini division. And I don't want her to go into train. I think this suits her really well. So we kept her food moderate, kept her body comp in an unbelievable place. And starting off prep now, she's away in August, so we have a little bit of a push to August, a little bit of time off in August, and we're going to push from she's back to 17th of August up until what are we, the 19th of September or something, isn't it? Something like that. So we're going to make that push.
15.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So make that push to there. Which I'm really excited about. Who else we have? We have young Lily, who is doing OCB in the States in Kentucky in August 10th. And then we have Lily again competing August 17th. We spoke about Lily before jumping on the call, right?
Yeah.
Lily is a junior competitor and, man, built for the bikini division. Like, this girl isn't going to be an absolute superstar. Like, you've probably seen me guys posting my story about her quite a good bit and posting on my page about her quite a good bit. She's just in such an unbelievable place. So Lily is going to be one of those that I think coming into the OCB, we're aiming to get pro status in the OCB. So turn pro in the Natural Federation in America. And then a week later, she has an NPC show as well. So we set these kind of high expectations for her coming in just based on the people that I've put into those federations in the past. You know, we have like Amira, Julia, and Kaylee all have turned pro inside of the OCB. And when I had that conversation with Lily, I said, look, I do put you in the same caliber as those individuals, and they're very good bikini competitors. And I do think that you're up there with them. So if they can nab that overall win, if they can kind of turn pro, which they've all did in the past, I absolutely think that you can do it as well. I think that would be my sixth or seventh pro to turn pro inside the OCB. I think we have, yeah, some six or seven. And so she's going to go for that. And then we're going to go to the NPC a week later and just see how she fares out in the NPC. So I'm excited. I think the NPC will probably suit her a little bit better just from the level of conditioning and her shape and structure. She's very NPC like, which is exciting. But as a junior, man, coming into this
That's the
very,
crazy.
very mature as a junior in her mindset as an athlete. And that's what I admire the most about her, how she's composing herself in regards to this push. You know, we spoke about this before we kicked off. We started off Lily's prep and we had food in a pretty decent place. And Lily is what 6 weeks out now at the moment. So up until last week, she's had 2 high days per week. Strategically put, I think it was Friday, Saturday, we gave her the high days. So when we started off her prep, she had basically 7 high days in her like off season, right? 7 days of pretty high food. We just dropped it down to 5. And that 5 day drop created such a big dip in energy balance. All we had to do then was give a little bit of a push in cardio. And Lily's cardio has never gone above 45 minutes, you know, and she's had 2 high days per week. And the girl is like peeled to the bone at the moment. We have a 1% change to make in upper body detail and a little bit more to come in from glute and hamstring tie-in. But like her last show of the season is in August 17th. We're only the 2nd of July at the moment. So she has a really good runway ahead of her. But just that level of composure, how level-headed she is. Never once have I gotten a text message off her to say that this is too tough or it's too hard or the push has been too aggressive, because it hasn't been. And it's all been reflecting on her start point. You know, she came in starting prep not in a like unbelievable place, but in a good enough place that we could look at the time frame available, give her a little bit more time, and use those tools of keeping the metabolism in an unbelievable play. You know, keeping food nice and high for 2 days per week, and now we're on 1 day per week where we've had the refeed. And what we're going to start doing moving forward is just auto regulate the refeed. So we had it was an 8 day gap just there previously where we just ran the baseline diet, and then we fed her up yesterday. So we've seen her updates come through this morning and back to baseline for a few days. And we're just going to keep on riding that roller coaster from now up until the stage, pull down to baseline, hit a new low weigh in, refeed up, back down to baseline, new low weigh in, refeed up. And we're just going to rinse and repeat that right the way up to peak week, 7 days out, just run her baseline diet. We're going to either run her carb load 2 days out, back to baseline 1, and then go, because Lily has a great ability to refeed up, but then the day later look really good, but then 2 days later look absolutely wild. Like she can have that kind of positive drop the second day. So we're just going to trial that out across the next couple of weeks with her and just figure out what day would suit best to put her on stage, because we have to also think if we refeed her up 2 days, on that 1 day, if we manipulate fluid, she could just be a little bit too flat because she has high fluid in her already. Now at the moment, she could just be a little bit too flat 1 day out. So we'll run all those trials across the next couple of weeks, which this is when the prep gets so exciting, man, when you can start to like trial these bases and running these high days when you feel like you want them and assess the look. Like Lily checked in yesterday morning, yesterday post workout, this morning, and she check in tomorrow morning. Yeah, that might seem a little bit too much for people, but when you're at a place 6 weeks out, when we have to monitor your physique so much to try to pick where does the best look fall, you know, you're in a great place. You know, if you're checking in once per week with your coach and it's like, all right, rinse and repeat, keep going, rinse and repeat, keep going, that's because you're not in a good place, and you know, body comp potentially needs to be improved. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how she gets on, man. As a junior, like the potential is just scary. She's
Man,
gonna
that that speaks volumes about her, the fact that she's that age and in that condition that quickly. And it kind of ties into what we spoke about before. This is like the key to an enjoyable preps, is like, obviously there's a few factors with her. She's that age. There are, and it's not discounting any of the work or discrediting any of the work. There are certain people that are made for this and they just adapt that or adopt that athlete mentality so quickly. And it's just like, not that it comes easy to them, but it's just natural almost to them. And then on top of that as well, like her being in such a good position in the start, allowing her to keep high days in consistently. It's fine with pushing now because it's not a case of she's had to dig so hard for 10 weeks to get here and do crazy things to get here. It just makes the entire prep so much more enjoyable.
Yeah,
so much. And you just can't overstate the importance of having a good starting position, which we both spoke about. Like, do you know what I mean? I think that is just such an underrated tool, and so many people jump into preps without setting foundations into a good spot. And you're setting yourself up to, you don't get me wrong, you can still come in absolutely peeled to the bone, but it's most likely going to be a grind. It's going to be an absolute grind, and that takes away, unless obviously you're one of those people who, loves the suffer fest and loves that, it's going to be horrific. Do you know what I mean?
No, of course it will, man. And there's going to be like elements to her prep where she has such an advantage as well. And there's going to be elements to her prep where she is putting herself ahead of people, in a sense of, one of the hardest pendulums to manage on a prep is stress and fatigue. Because what inevitably happens when you are short on time, you have to push very, very hard. And when you push hard, there's almost like this needle gauge that if it sits too far to the side of fatigue, your body will not respond. But you have to push it as close to that needle as possible to get the level of response that you need, because time is so short. So there's that constant balance and management of pushing extremely difficult, having to pull them back. The fear of pulling them back then has to be compromised by the time scale that you have available. Because if you're pulling them back for 2 days to manage fatigue, you're then inevitably taking 2 days off the push. And that can be extremely difficult to manage. And the best way to gain that advantage is, like we said, just get ready early. Just have her in a position, or have him in a position, whatever, and whoever you're coaching, in a place where those advantages are now on your side. You're starting off a prep in a good place where composition, we're not asking people to start off prep in stage conditioning, but just relative to the time frame that's available. Like if you have a 16-week prep, that's 16 weeks of, scale drops and improvements that you inevitably are in shape. You're reverse engineering that look on the day, and 16 steps back. Are you in that place? If it's a yes, amazing, let's go for it. If it's a no, just be willing and understanding to know that you do have a bit of a push ahead of you, and you are going to get to the back end of that prep, and it is going to be harder to manage that. And that's when I know we want to talk about like a coaching timelines and prep timelines. We'll use like Chloe as an example. So any of you who know Chloe is, again, one of the most impressive people that you'll see in person. When Chloe starts to hit poses, her whole body it's like someone puts like a bicycle pump into her. And when she starts posing, her body just goes like dum dum dum, and it just grows and comes into this phenomenon that you see standing in front of you. But Chloe, if you look at Chloe's starting point, you would never in a million years think that is the Chloe who stands on that stage in front of you today, and the athlete and the individual that she is today. But Chloe, when we were kind of going through her prep, we had that push. We were really had to dig deep to get into condition, because her starting point, like, arguably could have been a little better. Probably a fault of my own of pushing the off season, but we were able to rectify it quite well. But the enjoyment that we had of, let's say, pushing to the first show was very, very tough. Chloe was doing double cardios. She had her food down low, and it was a challenge. Yes, we had refeeds. Yes, we had a little bit of a back pull to be able to make, but luckily we made condition. To the second show, it was such a less aggressive approach. We had cardio from 2 hours a day down to, I think, 40 or 45 minutes. Food was higher. The check-ins as a whole so much more positive, and just overall the feeling of the prep was incredible. And I have to say, the difference in Chloe's physique from show one to show two was substantially different, because we know we had, 4 or 5 weeks to make those improvements, but it was only a 1% change we had to make. So we confidently knew that give her less cardio, give her more food, reduce that element of fatigue, make the prep as a whole more exciting for her, and make it like this kind of happier environment for her to be in. And it's probably the most enjoyable 5 weeks I've ever had working with an athlete, because just every single check-in conversation that we had, it just spelled excitement and happiness. And it was because we had that timeline set up to do so. We knew for Chloe, get you inward, push you hard. As the fat mass was coming off, we just seen this like unbelievable physique that was underneath it. And I think for all of us, like you seen Chloe in person multiple times, the level of athlete that this girl is. Like Chloe is another one of those people, mate, that I think the sky is the limit for her. She's going to take the rest of this year off. We're in a mini cut at the moment because she's the holiday coming up. So after the holiday, we're in the grind. We're going to get back into that growth season, push to the end of the year. Chloe wants to do some international shows next year. So we're thinking about some PCA Spain shows and some shows in the UK, and then maybe one Irish, which I'm really excited about. I think going away for her is probably a good thing to do as well. But I think the judges have seen her here and they know the level of athlete she is. I do want to get her onto kind of bigger stages as well. I want to get her to some big UK shows, and I want to get her onto an international show as well, maybe like a PCA Spain or a Universe or something like that, because I think, as crazy as it sounds, but in smaller shows, it probably doesn't do Chloe's physique enough justice. I think Chloe needs to be on a really, really big stage against some really top level girls. Like you seen it in the second show, it was a pretty busy train bikini lineup, and she beat like some really, really good people because the standard was almost higher, and the volume of high level competitors was higher, and it almost like escalated her physique, if that makes sense. So I'm excited to see those international shows with her next year. That's going to be very, very exciting. It's something we're really looking forward to. But just having the comfort of that timeline, knowing that it wasn't a one and done. And I think that's such a big part of the prep game, isn't it, dude? Like having that effective timeline in front of you. So when you're kind of setting it up with your guys, what are kind of some of those key considerations that you're looking at within the timeline, and like why are you setting up more than one show, like with Nathan, for example?
Okay, so in that segues into the next point, which is really good, and that's like why you do multiple shows. I think there's multiple reasons why you should do multiple shows. And just to preface it, I've made that mistake before. In my first competitive season, I was like MBFI and didn't even consider like possibility of doing another show because you're so set on this one goal. And it wasn't that I just didn't know about it. But for anybody listening, would highly recommend to do multiple shows. And some of the reasons why is, first of all, you spoke about Chloe there, right? When you are swinging that pendulum, let's say to one side, and you're building up that fatigue, you're building up that inflammation, maybe the athlete is under stress from digging and things like that, you never know, because you can't accurately measure how much fatigue, how much stress, how much inflammation is impacting the look. So you're pulling back with the hope of, okay, maybe we'll run 2 higher days with no cardio, lower steps. Hopefully that'll bring the look back to life. But you never know 100% until you've done that multiple times. So first of all, is as the coach's point of view, the reason for doing multiple shows is you're going to learn the body so much more. You're going to learn how hard you can push that athlete before it has a negative impact. Can you push a little bit further? And obviously, especially if you're starting with an athlete and it's just a prep, like if you haven't done a gaining phase with them, you're learning as you go, essentially. Do you know what I mean? You're learning as you go and how they're responding to the adjustments that you're making and things like that. So having more exposure to their physique, first of all, is going to allow you to then have a better idea when it comes to peaking that athlete.
Yeah,
massively. And then obviously that brings us on to the next point, which would be when it comes to shows, you've got multiple attempts at peaks. Some people are very, very different. Some people respond better feeding into a show. Some people respond better carb load. As you talked about there with Lily, like you're still figuring out now, okay, do we do 1 heavy carb day with 2 baseline days? That's the benefit of doing multiple shows is, come, let's say that third show, that fourth show in one season, you're like, right, we've done 3 shows before this. This was our best look. This is exactly what we did. Now we're about to bring that best look to this 4th show. Because, and I actually, funny enough, this is a post I think you put up literally like a year and a half ago, maybe even 2 years ago, about your first peak, unless you are in shape super early and have trialed multiple peaks before your show, your first peak is essentially a shot in the dark. Like, you're hoping, okay, hopefully this brings the best look. But if you don't have any proof leading into that, it is a shot in the dark. Like, and like, anyway, you can't really disagree with that, because unless you've done multiple trials beforehand, you don't know.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Yes, you have methods of peaking that work and work well, and the athlete will respond well, but bringing a best look, like everybody knows their best look is that day, like, whoa, I look crazy today. Do you know what I mean? Bringing that look there's a lot of trials and manipulations that need to go into that, and it's completely person dependent. You can have your peaks and how you normally do peaks, but everybody is different.
Yeah.
Everybody's so different. So multiple shows, multiple peaks, you're just going to get a way better idea of how that person will respond to a certain methodology. That's it.
I think with peaking, you need to have a subjective measure to gain against. And that's what, like, when you said there about the one peak, like, it's either going to be a home run or it's going to be a swing and a miss. But how do you know unless you have something to gauge it off? You know, if you do one show and you put them on stage and you look at them and you say, yeah, they look great, but okay, 2 weeks later, try a different approach, or use that feedback and not having a biasing opinion. Like, we can all look at every single one of our clients at show morning and think they look incredible. Remove the bias and subjectively look at that physique and think, okay, what can I do to improve that? Or most importantly, the second they walk off stage, just creep up to the judges panel and say, look, my client was number 65. What could she have done to improve? Why was she second? Because if she was second, there's a reason she was second. If she was third, there's a reason she was third. If she's first, there's a reason why she was first. There will be an area of an improvement that they can make. And 9 times out of 10, if they're in shape, that improvement can be made through a peak. So if they want her to come in a little bit tighter, okay, maybe we can use that variable through food, through sodium, through water intake. If she needs to be a little bit fuller, we can use that variable through those metrics. If they maybe felt like the physique was a little bit washed out, or maybe there's a little bit of a spillover, or maybe stress was a little bit high in the physique, that's all going to show through. The judges don't have a bias. And although people potentially like to think they do, judges don't have a bias. And how a bodybuilding show is judged over 7 judges, the highest score and the lowest score gets removed, and the 5 in the middle get judged. But it's a 5 judge reading, because there has to be a winner or a loser. Like, if you have 3 judge high, 2 judge low, or vice versa, like, you're gonna get a winner somewhere. And that's why they say it's always kind of comes down to potentially a 1-point decision, because that could be 3 judges having X client ahead and 2 judges having Y client, and that could be 1 point that separated the 3 from the 2. So judging it's not biased. It's one of the most subjective, objective things that can happen, and people win for a reason. Of course, judges might, our coaches might think otherwise. Again, we have massive biases towards our athletes, but there's a reason why people win. There's a reason why people come second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, etc. Go to speak to the judge, because the judge is going to give you that real life, in person, just happened feedback on why they think that your guy didn't win or didn't come second, or why they potentially placed where they placed. And that's where you can make those improvements, because you actually have something to judge it against now. You have something to gauge it towards. So leading into the second peak, let's say you try the same thing and you get no difference, or you try the same peak and there's no difference in the look on stage, or there's no difference in the placing. Okay, again, we look at Stacey for a prime example. We ran Stacey, came first. We got told to come in a little bit tighter. We brought her in a little bit tighter, came second. In our first show, we got feedback, wanted to come in tighter. We brought her in tighter again, and she was just nipped in the bud by somebody who was just a little bit crisper. But we have 2 different peaks that brought different looks leading into this year. We have those data points collected and available of what we need to do to improve. But that's why having a show season is so important. Like having a one and done, you're one chancing your ability to produce the best response. And if you're in a sport where it's so subjective and it's comparable, is giving one shot enough? Look, it can fall in your favor, and you can get up there and you can do a show and you can come first in your first show. That's absolutely amazing. Great. And if it does, then it's worked out. You've rolled the dice and they've rolled in your favor. That can happen. You can walk into a casino tomorrow and put €1,000 on a blackjack and walk away a very rich man. Anything can happen. Anything is possible. And when in bodybuilding, it can sometimes fall in the same odds, but having more opportunities to do more shows, getting in front of other judges, or getting in front of the same judges. Why it's brilliant in Ireland, why they have 2 PCAs at the start and 2 PCAs at the end, because it gives people that opportunity to do both. It gives them the opportunity to get in front of the same judges who are going to remember the same faces, who are going to remember the same feedback that they gave. And if you make that improvement, you will be rewarded for that improvement that you've made. And we've seen that in the past where, it's arguable that maybe placings might have been a little bit strange in a show because they're judging what's in front of them, but the judges can argue, well, I placed that girl second ahead of maybe who you thought might have placed higher than her because her last showing, her presentation was completely different. We gave her all that feedback. She improved so much and improved the look to a point where we actually put her ahead of somebody who arguably could have beaten her because that improvement was so substantial. She took her feedback on board and it made that subjectiveness to us a little bit more favorable to her because she's making the improvements that we're asking her to make. And that's why we got to look at bodybuilding as an entirety, and having that multiple show runway, which just gives you better chances to improve, better chances to actually assess the look, make improvements on the look, and you then have this collective data pool available of, okay, if I put in carbs 2 days out, baseline diet 1 day out, put them on stage, how does that look? If I give them carbs 2 days out, give them carbs 1 day out, put them on stage, how does that look? If I front load the carbs, how does that look? If I just incrementally run carbs throughout the week, how does that look? I think when in peaking, there's one outcome of a peak, and that's to be on stage as full as possible and as dry as possible. I think as a coaching collective across the board, we can all agree that's the look you want to put someone on stage, dry and full. No matter what division they're in, there's levels to dryness and there's levels to fullness, but that's the outcome.
Yeah.
There's thousands different ways that we can make that happen.
Yeah.
And that's when having those different peaks and those different trials and different cut-off points of water or not changing water at all, everybody responds differently, and we all have one method that we might go to at the beginning, and it's just assessment of that method. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, all right, we'll catch up on the next one. And you kind of learn the individuals, and you hear people at the top of the food chain saying as well. If you look at Matt Jansen and Quinton, they just did one show together, and the one thing Matt said was, yeah, I missed a peak because it's my first time ever peaking him. How can I know his physique if it's my first time? And you're talking about somebody who is arguably the best peaker in the world, somebody who doesn't miss with people because he's been coaching Sean Clarita for 7 years, he's been coaching Nick Walker for 4 years, he's been coaching Brett Wilkin for 3 or 4 years. Like they're coaching people so long that their peaks are almost like autopilot at this point. I've even heard Cal Reichig talking about he has a men's physique natural athlete, and I think this is their 11th or 12th show they're going for this year. And he said the same thing. Yeah, he said the same thing. Yeah, my peak with him is it's almost autopilot. The prep is almost autopilot because I know his body so well. I know what works for him. And that's why I think we can all have that argument that the one and done show seasons, they're brilliant for experience and they're brilliant for enjoyment and challenging yourself. But if you want to be a competitor, and under the category of a competitor means you're going to be competitive inside these shows, you got to give it more than one. You have to give it more than one.
Absolutely. And then even that's funny that you said that thing about Cal, is like I think as well, if you were only doing, even if you just did one show, but you're like, oh, it's fine because I'm going to compete next year again, but you only do one show, even with that, you've probably noticed with athletes who you've worked with long term, one gaming phase and like one prep done differently to the year before can completely change the response of the body.
Of course.
Do you know what I mean? Like you might run, let's say, for example, a front load and it might work great for a client this year. And then next year, you just notice that, wow, they respond really well off a back load. And that's where, like, once again, if you just done a one and done, you still are only chancing things and like aren't 100% sure. And then just even like there's smaller reasons why multiple shows. Obviously, the overarching reasons that you want to bring your best physique, but also like number one, you've worked so hard to get into that condition. Like not from a vanity point of view, but like milk that, enjoy it. You know, like I remember when I look back on my first prep, and I was like, oh, I've done all that work for like 10 minutes. Do you know what I mean? Like get up on stage, because as well, if you realize after your first ever show, let's say for example, or your first show that season, that wow, I love this sport, I thoroughly enjoy it. First of all, the more stage experience you can get, the better, because you know, posing under lights, doing a routine in front of, you know, a good few people, judges, like the more experience you can get doing that, the more confident you will be, and the more that'll play to your advantage in the future. And then lastly, as well, obviously this is completely person dependent too, but for the likes of inexperienced or nervous people, if you're only doing something once a year, and especially in bodybuilding, the fact it's such a niche sport,
Yeah.
the antics and the lead up to the show itself, like show weekend, day, some people get very nervous, very anxious, and that can impact the look massively as well. So the more you're exposed to that, the less nervous you're going to be, the less anxious you're going to be. Like how many first-time athletes have you been with backstage and they are shitting it before walking up on stage? Do you know what I mean? And the peak can be absolutely perfect, but if you're spending 5-6 hours that morning absolutely dying with nerves,
To be
it's
real.
going to impact the look. Do you know what I mean? It's going to impact the look. Like, and obviously that's the coach's job to keep them at ease and stuff. But you can't blame someone who's never done anything like that before, or has only maybe done it once in the last year, that they feel nervous. Like, so there are two smaller reasons that will also impact the look as well. That why it's beneficial to do multiple shows. Do you know what I mean?
That's why I look at the just almost like a two separate camps, right? You have the people that just want to have a one and done, just for the experience of competing, and then you have the competitors, who are people who are willing to commit. Let's just say your competitive career is going to be 2 or 3 years, but they become active within those 2 or 3 years. Now they spend time going through the processes. Like I have a client, Amira, who I've been coaching Amira for quite a long time now, and we did our first show season at the end of last year, and then we competed. Let's say we prepped from April up until I think our first show was in September. We did September, October, November. I think Amira competed 4 times within 4 shows. Only once ever placed outside of the top two. She was always in a first or a second. She just has unbelievable stage presence, cracking physique as well. Like she's built for being a bikini competitor. But then, you know, we looked at Amira's physique and we had that conversation. She doesn't need to grow much more. You know, it's more from a conditioning perspective. She doesn't need to grow. So we took off. I think her last show was in October. So November, December, started prep again in January. Prep from January to April, did one show and went in and won 3 classes in one show in the NPC. And then we're going to take the rest of this year off, and then she's going to go again in January. So she's very, very active, you know, very active and willing. Like if I told Amira to compete next weekend, she would. Like, she loves that side of the process, loves being in prep. And sometimes you gotta rein those people in a little bit, and that's why we're taking the rest of this year off to just run a little bit of a phase where the emphasis is on training a bit more, and you know we're emphasizing and prioritizing what we feel is the right thing to emphasize and prioritize as of right now, in regards to a little bit of time off, less exposure to a deficit. And you know, like in relative to it, April, let's say May to November, where we will have ran recon phases. We will have ran a pre-prep phase from November to January. If we look at the collectiveness from like April last year right the way through up until April, May next year, her actual time out of prep is very, very low. And she's had a lot of time and experience. And she will have probably done, we look at next year's show season, God, 10 plus shows in less than 2 years because of the activeness that she has. And I think that's something that I think needs to be a completely different podcast. We could talk about that for almost an hour, but that is something that needs to be addressed as well. Like, if you want to be good at this, you need to do this. You need to be active within this. Like, you need to spend time competing and be a regular competitor and be somebody who's up there in front of absolutely every judge. They can get their hands on, and that's how you can get success. And like I said, out of the, what have we done now, probably 5 or 6 shows in total, there's only, I think, once she was outside the top 1 or 2. I think she came third in like an open NPC show, and every single other one has been either a first, second, or an overall. Like, she's an absolute phenomenon. But because she's so active, she's so involved, her life is bodybuilding. She treats every prep, every phase like it's a prep phase. And that's why, we talk about that like seasonal approach, and people who are up there and who are active, like, success leaves clues. If you want to be one of those individuals who is quite successful in bodybuilding, just do what they do.
And that's no more than like the fact that she's coming first and second all the time. That's not somebody who needs a massive gain and phase of weight. That's refined, Stephen. Do you know what I mean? You're refining the fine details that are, if it's a show where she came second, well, what could you have been a bit better in?
Always condition. It's always condition, yeah. Always.
And that's another thing as well, is if you, like, let's say you're thinking about competing as well. And I think we actually spoke about this as well, about a past client who you had, is you can go into one show and you can come dead last, let's say out of 5 people, and you go to a different federation and you can be in the top 2. Like, it's such a subjective sport. Do you know what I mean? That it, like, and sometimes for some athletes that can be the ruining of them. And if you only did that for a show and you're like, well, I came last, like, I'm obviously not meant to be doing this.
Yeah.
And 2 weeks later you do a different federation and you're in the top 2 out of 6. It's like, oh, geez, I'm one of the best.
That comes down to as well, like, having a coach, having an understanding of choosing the right federation to put their client in as well, because certain people are just suited and fixed on different feds. Like, we had Kaylee, the client you're referencing there, do an OCB pro show, so our pro debut, and didn't even crack the top 5, and a week later going to an open NPC show as a junior, as a natural athlete, and win an open NPC class, and can't even crack top 5 in a like, it's you're right, it is so subjective, but certain criterias need to be met for certain federations, and some people, they just, like I said, with Lily, I have very strong hopes for Lily in the OCB, but I think Lily is made for NPC. Like, the shape and flowiness and the limb length and the height of the rib cage structure and how flowy the lower body is, it's designed for NPC. Like, it's, if you were to put an NPC silhouette in front of us, like, Lily would just slot right into it. So I think as a coach, yeah, you just got to meet that demand for sure. All right, buddy, we've been cracking on for an hour and 15 minutes now. Yeah. This is a long one, right, guys? So that's episode 1 wrapped up. As I said, just a recap, we went through why we wanted to rebrand, as I think that was important for me to message that, as I haven't done that yet. An introduction to Mark, who's going to be, of course, my co-host on this journey with the PHYSIQUE-CAST. I keep going to say PHYSIQUE-CAST podcast. It's just like it's rolling off the tongue. It's not called the PHYSIQUE-CAST podcast. It's just called the PHYSIQUE-CAST. It's an introduction to Mark, who's going to be my co-host. Is going to be side by side with me amongst this journey when we interview other prep coaches and when we have our discussions on board as well, as to what we think is important and relatable and relevant inside the prep game. A bit of a recap on our clients, which I think is important for us to do, as this is a platform for them to be celebrated and highlighted as well, and why it's important for a prep season to be done. So, excellent first episode, mate. I appreciate that. Thank you very much for your time.
All right. Thank you very much. I'll chat to you very soon.